This week, an investigation by our partners at 10 News found that some guardrails on San Diego freeways may be responsible for serious injuries to drivers and passengers, all because of one small design change. 10 News investigative reporter Mitch Blocker looked into the story. Here's a brief clip from his report.
From the shoulder of the 805, Harmon showed us the model that was approved by the government in 2000, one with a 5-inch head. He says in 2005, the manufacturer, Trinity Industries, redesigned its guardrails, making them smaller and using less material to build them. This is the aftermath of a crash in Tennessee. Harmon says these pictures show what can happen to a 4-inch guardrail in a head-on collision. The rail detaches from the head, Harmon says, and can impale a car and its driver.
So, Mitch, how common are these newer 4-inch head guardrails in San Diego County?
We found a few more than a dozen, about 14 on San Diego roads, all the way from the 78 to the 5 to the 805. To the 15, there's some on the 8 as well. They're fairly common. They are in every state in the country, and they're in 60 countries internationally.
How can a 1-inch design change make such a difference to the safety of drivers on freeways?
Well, that 1 inch is just the weld on the head of the guardrail, and it actually makes the dimensions much smaller. So you're talking about 87 pounds of material that's no longer on a 4-inch guardrail that was in a 5-inch guardrail.
And did the Federal Highway Administration approve this design change?
They did, but they approved it based on specifications that never said anything about the fact that the company that made this guardrail was going from a 5-inch railhead to a 4-inch railhead. So they didn't have that design specification.
And what about Caltrans? Did Caltrans have that information?
Caltrans takes its lead based off the Federal Highway Administration, as do state departments of transportation all across the country. So if the Federal Highway Administration approves something, says it's okay, the state departments of transportation usually go off that lead. Some state departments of transportation have higher standards, and they go by those as well. But not only was this federally approved, but it's also federally paid for.
Okay, Trinity Industries makes these guardrails. They made the design change. Did they not inform federal regulators about the design change?
That is, if there is any smoking gun, if you will, in this entire story, it's the fact that Trinity Industries admits that they omitted the fact that in 2005 they went from making a 5-inch guardrail head to a 4-inch guardrail head. So when the Federal Highway Administration approved the new design, they approved it without ever knowing that that 1-inch difference existed.
And what are the consequences for that?
Well, there are lawsuits and allegations from this whistleblower who you saw in the clip that it's a world of difference. It is the difference in some cases between life and death, that the 4-inch guardrail head is simply not substantial enough. It doesn't have enough heft in order to keep the head, the flat head, which is blunt, on the guardrail when a collision occurs. And what happens, at least in the allegations, is that the guardrail head falls off and it creates a spear with the rest of the guardrail. You saw in that picture that can go through the passenger cabin all the way through the taillights.
And tell me about this whistleblower you spoke to. What's his story?
His name is Joshua Harmon. He is a competitor of Trinity Industries, a guardrail manufacturer who's based in Virginia. Now, he has quite a story. He's involved in litigation with Trinity. They have sued him for defamation based on what he is saying. He is driving the country looking for these 4-inch guardrail heads. And this originally started because he tried to copy the design for the 4-inch guardrail, thinking, his lawyers thought, he thought that the patents had expired. They had not. So this originally started because he re-engineered, he reverse-engineered the 4-inch Trinity guardrail. Trinity sued him to stop doing that, but he says based on what he found when he did that, he couldn't ignore what he thought was an unsafe product.
So what happens next with these lawsuits? I mean, who has to step in and correct the situation?
A great question. At this point, the Federal Highway Administration is somewhat distancing itself from this, saying, well, we approved it in 2005 and we stand by that approval. The lawsuits have to work themselves out in state and federal court. At this point, there's no court decision pointing to whether or not these guardrails are safe or are dangerous. At this point, it's all allegations. Trinity Industries says that their product is safe and they stand by it. Guys like Joshua Harmon and some of those people who claim that they were injured or had loved ones killed in accidents because of this guardrail say otherwise.
Mitch Blocker, thank you for a very good report.
Thank you for having me.